Hey class, this is Dr. Chad Kish. Welcome back to PEP 320, Assessment in Physical Education and Wellness. This is the beginning to our Unit 2 material. And Unit 2 covers rubrics and scoring guides, the Chapter 4 material, Understanding Rubrics and Scoring Guides. Chapter 8, Developing, Culminating, and Progressive Assessments. And we will touch on Chapter 13, Grading in Physical Education. Here's the introduction to Unit 2. First of all, by the end of the unit, we will be able to explain the basics of using assessments and scoring guides in the field. We will develop and use scoring guides to help us evaluate performance, both in physical education, activity, and career-related performance. We will develop various performance-based assessments and understand how to use them in a variety of settings. We will understand how to move from basic to complex assessments in order to improve performance on a continuum and get to some kind of culminating or summative activity. And we will also learn how to use assessments in the grading for physical education class. PE traditionally, in the past, has used assessments, performance-based assessments on a limited scope, but it's becoming more popular and is needed in the standards-based education process. So today, we're going to get started on Chapter 4, Understanding Rubrics and Scoring Guides. All right, so if you haven't yet, make sure you read Chapter 4 of the textbook, Performance-Based Assessment for Middle and High School Physical Education by Lund and Kirk. Here are our specific objectives for Module 5. All right, at the end of this module, which is Chapter 4, you will, as a student, be able to discuss the 3 criteria types for rubrics and scoring guides, develop a checklist style scoring guide, develop criteria for generalized rubrics, develop criteria and levels for task-specific rubrics, synthesize information on scoring guides to complete a assessment. You will be able to list and discuss the specific criteria and levels for a task-specific scoring guide. You will develop and apply a skill-specific rubric or scoring guide for a sports-related skill. This could be a locomotor or manipulative skill. And you will develop a full task-specific rubric that'll have your task, your important or critical criteria, your levels of performance, and we will include performance descriptors to round out the rubric style scoring guide. So what are today's big ideas? Today's big ideas will be understanding how to judge or score a performance-based activity. We'll learn exactly what is a rubric and a checklist. We will find the benefits for using scoring guides. We'll discuss that. We will also learn the 3 criteria types of rubrics. This is product, process, and progress. That's an important thing to understand. We will learn what a checklist is and how do you use one. And today's culminating activity for the day, how we apply our knowledge, will be how do I develop a checklist to score performance? So let's introduce the chapter material first. As teachers or leaders, we make judgments about students or other people's performance that are based on certain specific criteria. This could be, as a physical education teacher, we could score performance on a specific task, such as shooting a goal in floor hockey, or on a more global aspect, such as playing floor hockey in a game-like setting. It also could be as a leader. Are we a manager or a professional in the wellness field? Do we have to judge other people's performance as a manager or leader? Are we judging people's performance to see if they have progress and are meeting their job-specific criteria? And as a athletic trainer or physical therapist, we have to make judgments about their performance to see how we're going to continue to integrate them back into their normal activity, whether that's sports related or activities of daily life. But there's going to be different criteria we score people on. What about scoring guides? Scoring guides are used to explain criteria and are used for judging as well as documenting performance. Scoring guides can take many forms. We'll discuss things such as a checklist, a point value checklist, and a rubric. All right, most of you have seen most of these in the past, might just not know exactly what category they fit in. Let's explain what a criteria is, because we're talking about performance based on criteria. So let's look outside of the wellness field for a second and think of a shoe analogy. If you go into a shoe store, how does a salesperson know what to even bring you? They might ask you questions. All right, first of all, are you looking for a dress shoe, a casual shoe, or a performance-based shoe? All right, so you're going to give them different criteria, and they should ask these questions. If you ever sold items at a department store or a retail outlet, you're going to go through a training on, you're going to ask specific questions and ensure you're getting the customer what they're looking for. First of all, you might ask them, what style of shoe are you looking for? What type of activity might you use them in? Is there a specific brand you're married to? What do you value? Is it the comfort? Is it the fit? Is it the durability? Is it the looks? Or is it the price? Right? So those could be different criteria if you're just trying to understand what a criteria is. All right, the shoe sale would be the overall event or task. All right, so let's dig in. What is a rubric? A rubric is a document used to record a score for a task or a performance. It helps us provide some kind of artifact about the performance. All right, we might use this in a variety of different ways. Guidelines. A rubric could be considered guidelines by which a product or performance is judged. That's a Wiggins quote from the textbook. His original quote was in 1996. He says they state and explain the criteria used for judging performance. So when we develop a rubric, the first important thing is listing the task, and then under that we will have criteria. Those are the important aspects of things we do. If you think about criteria of a sports-related skill, we've broke that down into our 4 critical components. Those could be your criteria. That would be the stance, the preparatory phase, the action phase, and the follow-through. And you may even break things down on 2 points of a stance, 2 points of the preparatory action, and so forth, depending on how detailed your rubric or scoring guide is. And then your basic rubric will explain the standards for acceptable performance or levels of performance. These would be your performance descriptors that we'll learn later in this chapter. And that was a quote from put in the textbook as well from Herman, Asbacher, and Winters in 1996. Rubrics explain or provide a way for teachers or leaders to help communicate the expectations for performance, and then how to document it, artifact it, and record a score. Students and employees should use a full detailed rubric as a guide in completing a task or assignment. You might have basically a rubric style sheet that you use when evaluating an athlete to see if they can return to activity. Do they have 90 degrees of flexion? Do they have 45 degrees of extension? Can they bear weight? So they'll go through different scales on the rubric if it needs improvement, acceptable level, or exceeds expectations. There might be multiple levels, and you will document that to help, as the athletic trainer, give the physical therapist prescription to continue to improve as well as to return to play. All right, so a rubric, once again, is a document that we use to artifact some kind of score or levels of performance on a variety of criteria or critical components related to a task. So, to dig a little deeper, rubrics detail what is significant or the important parts of the assessment or task. Think of something like the golf swing. Remember, there are four critical components of any movement. What's the stance for a golf swing? Right? Think about we're driving off of a tee. What is the preparatory phase? That's when you're going to pull the club back. It's going to come up over your head. You're going to transfer your weight, right? The action phase, this is where you're going to bring the club from above your head into actually manipulating or hitting the ball, all right? And then your follow through, that's basically when you finish off your swing, the final transfer of weight, and how you're going to accentuate the club up over your head in the follow through. So those could be your four critical components of a golf swing. These four phases are important to put on your checklist. You may actually have subcomponents of those four critical components if you want to get more into detail. All right. But remember, these help guide student learning. Students can look at the rubric and see where they fall when they're looking at levels of performance. All right. Remember, assessments have two important parts. The task, which is what the students are going to do to complete. That's probably the very top thing on the rubric. This is a gameplay scoring guide for soccer. This is a skill-specific scoring guide for the volleyball serve. All right, this is a generalized rubric for serves in a net game. All right, and then you'll have the criteria. This is what students are judged on. This is what is the most important part of developing the rubric. And like we said, that could be your four critical components if it's a skill-related task. If it's a professional-related task, like taping an ankle, you'll go through the phases of taping the ankle. If it's a performance judgment, like looking at the gait, you look at the 9 different phases of the gait, anywhere from your initial step, your push-off, your different gait phases. What are some benefits of using rubrics? First of all, they increase the consistency of scoring. When criteria are in writing, they can be used not only as a score sheet, but they can help the scorer make sure they put the students in the right level and don't just look at performance and go, they're okay, that's a 9 out of 10. Right? They provide us specific criteria. This helps the performer understand what they need to do, as well as helps the scorer understand how to score the activity. Rubrics can improve instruction. Yes, rubrics can actually improve instruction. Teachers can use these rubrics to clarify the expectations. This helps to communicate what's important to students. This is what we expect you to do. It helps teachers also align both instruction and the assessments with the instructional goals to ensure we're teaching the students what we want them to learn. Writing a rubric is an important part of the development process that can be used for teachers to understand and improve developing instructional methods, as well as help let students know what's important. And that's the next point. They let students know what is important. They help provide a focus for the students. What are the critical components? Do I have my stance correct and my follow-through correct? Those are generally the first two parts of the move you'll teach. This is what it should look like before, this is what it should look like after, and then you'll go to the preparatory phase and the action phase where you'll teach next. They help students make sense of the learning. They help the students understand what they're going to do and where they need to be. They also help employees understand expectations and help them prioritize tasks and focus on the important parts of the job first, or with a bigger time focus in understanding what's really critical. They provide a filter for what is important. For a student, this might be the critical aspects of skill performance. For an employee, it might help them understand what's more important. If you're an athletic trainer and you're middle of taping an ankle before a game and you get an emergency call over the walkie-talkie, what's more important? Responding to the emergency situation or pre-game taping of an ankle, right? So you might use that rubric or checklist to determine what's more critical. Let's dig a little bit deeper into what criteria means. Criteria for rubrics includes the desired standards or levels of performance. A criteria, like I said, is breaking down the specific skill or putting these specific phases of a performance in levels, and we usually do this in order from top to bottom. What do we see first? In America, we read left to right and top to bottom. So the top left corner is the first thing we'll do, going down to the last thing we'll do on the bottom, and then our levels of performance starts with beginner to expert, moving left to right. Clear criteria are important or essential in performance-based assessments so we can actually judge the work or perform it consistently. Remember, in multiple choice, true, false, or basic questions, the criteria are already clear. We don't need to put deep instructions or have a rubric, but this differs when we have a performance-based activity that we're going to grade the performance, not just answers. All right? Rubrics are used to assess performance and give a guide for specific feedback. Remember, the rubrics serve as directions for the student for each specific part of the assignment and a guide for the teachers to provide feedback. You can circle the level and say this is where you're at. Remember, you need to move one to the right here on the rubric, and it helps keep the focus for both the students and teachers on the important parts of the assignment and judging them consistently. Right? When giving feedback, specific cues are needed to improve performance, and when we use the rubric, we can determine those specific cues, like your elbow is not underneath the ball every time. It is about half of the time. So to improve performance, we need to focus on keeping your elbow underneath the ball and using the arm as a lever in your free throw. All right? In judging performance, the specific criteria are vital or critical to help improve that performance. We don't just look at the results, right? 9 out of 10, 90% is results. But did you use the form correctly? That's what we're going to look for when using a rubric. They'll help us judge the performance or knowledge of performance. Students can reach learning targets at a higher level if they actually understand what the targets are. Hey, we're shooting free throws today, or we're going to use correct form to shoot free throws today, focusing on our stance and our follow-through. All right? So a rubric provides those specific targets and gives students or performers something to actually challenge themselves and aim for. As I said at the beginning, we're going to learn 3 criteria types for rubrics, right? These aren't the criteria on rubrics. These are the 3 types of rubrics, and it's based on the criteria, what you're actually trying to judge. Number 1 is your product criteria, or what students produce or what they can do right now or at a certain point in time. This could be an artifact of learning or performance, such as an essay, developing a brochure, performing a dance, performing a sports skill in a skill type assessment or test. That could be shooting a basketball, a soccer ball, a hockey puck, throwing a variety of objects, or catching. Process criteria is a little bit different. Process criteria are critical elements necessary for correct performance. This would be judging performance or the form or actions over the results. That means, did they actually score? Did they actually hit the target? We do this by looking for form and technique. There might be something like effort in there, or participation, or completion, but we're more than likely going to look at the different critical criteria for the form of the throw, the hit, the catch, or the shot. All right? Progress criteria are a little bit different. They use rubrics or results over time. All right? You might have multiple checklists, multiple days on your rubric. They indicate how much students or performers have improved on some type of learning curve. This would be using a skills-related test, such as using a rubric to score form in a volleyball serve, and doing it on day 1 to have a baseline score, and then take day 3, day 5, possibly day 10 of your lesson or your unit in volleyball and compare those scores over time. It also might be a test that we'll go over later on, such as the fitness gram. The fitness gram has a variety of fitness components, and we can look at baseline scores and scores over time to see if students progress or get better as they do the activity. When using product criteria to judge student performance, it's also important to consider process criteria to look at results over time. What are simple scoring guides? All right, so let's back off of rubrics for a second and go to the easiest form of a scoring guide, the checklist. A checklist will contain a list of criteria that need to be observed for a performance or a product to meet expectations. This is basically the task with a list of critical components or characteristics down the left side, and then usually you'll just check yes or no. So they're commonly used in skill assessments, and they're very good, especially if they're short, for peer or self-assessments, or even to use in a video analysis. So remember, checklists don't really assign a score. You might score, if you have 5 components, each one's worth 1, so you know 4 out of 5 were correct. But it's just a yes or no, it's not a degree, right? So the scores are only concerned about demonstration of the characteristic. Remember, it's about the performance or part, not necessarily the results. So think about that. Did a student in the golf swing show the correct stance, yes or no? Did they show the correct preparatory phase, yes or no? Did they show the correct action phase, yes or no? Did they hold their follow-through correctly, yes or no? We're not really looking for degrees of performance here, all right? So remember, scores are really concerned about the demonstration of the overall characteristic. It's a checklist, not necessarily a score sheet of results. So keep the items on a checklist to the minimum. Too many criteria make the checklist difficult to use, especially if it's for students or peers. You can have a few more criteria if the teacher is using the checklist. You may even have a whole class checklist where you have everybody's name down the left side and then your criteria in the grid across the top, and you can use the checklist for a whole class. So in observing, teachers are able to score more criteria, but in peer observation, somewhere between 1 and 3, depending on the ability and the use of the peer observation and training by the teacher is kind of the limit. So a checklist is really good for evaluating things such as journals. If we're trying to evaluate feelings, emotions, the affective domain, or a controversial type of essay where to keep the scores beliefs out of it, you could use a checklist as a tool to evaluate completion of the task instead of those specific views. So I think we need to remember using some simple scoring guides such as a checklist have a lot of different things, a lot of different values that we can use on different tasks, from peer observations to reflecting on journals or portfolios. So here's a sample of a checklist for a physical education class. Look at the yes or no, plays within the rules of the game, shows good sportsmanship, does not argue with others, shares in team responsibilities, gives others a chance according to the rules, follows the coach's instructions, respects the other team's effort, offers encouragement to teammates, accepts officials' calls, accepts the outcome of the game, win or lose. This is an excellent example of a checklist used in physical education class or team sports based on sportsmanship, all right, and character development. And we like to do this. We like to so this can really be used to help us whether in a PE class or as a coach in a team sport. So let's look at a whole class checklist. This is a full class checklist for a massed assessment assessing the forward roll. It's figure 3.2 in the text. And this is you'll have all your students' name down the left side, and then you're going to look the first column you would leave blank, or you could see and mark all correct. And then they're going to have the different things that the students do right. These are the critical components. Assume the ready position, tuck the chin, raise the steps, stay curled, stand to finish. All right. So you'll check what the students do correctly. You'll have blanks they don't. And if you know, it's a good one. Sometimes this is over on the right, but it's good to have all correct so you know who is the expert performer. All right. So that is a full class checklist for a mass assessment. So let's dig into our portfolio activity for the day. All right. This would be, so take out a clean sheet of paper and do this activity. We're going to start by developing a checklist. So follow the directions here and start with A. List a sports-related skill. So this could be shooting a basketball, throwing any type of ball, kicking any type of ball. Think of the form of a sports-related skill, or you could even put in some ideas for gameplay. Are they able to do offensive skill, defensive skill, pass, shoot, right? Understand strategy and tactics, have good sportsmanship. It could be a gameplay situation, but usually breaking down a sports-related skill is a little bit easier. So under A, you're going to list the 4 essential critical components, all right? If you want to break down one of those critical components a little bit more, you can and have more than 4, all right? So you're going to number these 1 through 4. So this would be the stance, the preparatory phase, the action phase, and the follow-through, all right? And you might want to break the stance down into 2 parts, or the prep phase down into 2 parts, or the action phase into 2 parts. So you might actually have more than 4 essential critical components if you're looking at subcomponents. But then under number 1 through 4, I want you to explain those critical components. So if you put number 1 as stance, explain what the stance is. Feet shoulder width apart, weight on the balls of the feet, knees bent at about a 60-degree angle or a 35-degree angle, right? So explain what the stance is. The preparatory phase, explain what that looks like. You might have several bullet points under each of these numbers. So hopefully that makes sense. So make sure you're doing that on paper right now. So list your sports-related skill, list the 4 essential critical components, and then under each one of those, 1 through 4, put some bullet points to explain what that critical component looks like. This would be a good place to pause this video and do A. All right, now that you've completed A, let's move on to B, and we're going to do a really similar activity, but we're going to do it for a job-related skill. So list a job-related skill. This could be something you do in the professional career of coaching, teaching, being an athletic trainer or physical therapist, working as a personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach, an athletic director, a facility manager. So you're going to list a job-related skill. This could be taping an ankle, a first aid checklist, preparing for a game, preparing a travel bag for a game, preparing the field for a game. All right. It could be what you do about coming on the scene of an accident and in what order. So you're going to list those 5 or more critical components of that specific job-related skill. If this is packing a bag for an away game as a college coach, this is going to be a checklist, and you'll probably have about 10 things. What's important for you to take, all right? And you'll give that to your assistant coach or manager to make sure that they have everything ready. And then under those things, 1 through 5 or more, you'll explain what that critical component means, all right? So if it's coming on the scene of an accident, you'll say check the scene. Well, give me a bullet point or several bullet points what checking the scene means. We're going to look for something dangerous, like water, electric, different things. We're going to look at the scene to see if we can determine the history, a brief history of how the accident may have occurred. All right, you're going to see if other people are there. You're going to see if there are any other dangers or things you need to clear before you move on to the next phase. So you'll explain the critical components and bullet points. So this would be a good place to pause the video and do B. Remember, list multiple, at least 5 critical components for your checklist, and then explain in a bullet point what each of those critical components means. All right, now that we've done our journal activity, we want to go ahead and beef it up just a little bit for our assignment. So take your journal activity you just did on paper. We'll have an A and a B. You're going to list your sports-related skill with your essential skills or components, and under each number, you'll have your bullets of your breakdown, but then explain in that bullet what doing it correctly looks like. So you might want to change your verbiage a little bit just from making sure you have this to, hey, ensuring you have this packed. If we're making a checklist for taping an ankle, explain what each step means, all right? When you talk about the U or the horseshoe or whatever the case in the tape, explain what doing that correctly looks like. So you might have to change your verbiage on your bullet points. And then B, the same thing. You'll list your 5 or more critical components, number them, and then take your bullet points and write down what it looks like to do it correctly. So post this assignment, developing a checklist, to Canvas by the deadline that you'll see in the Canvas module, that the initial information page for Chapter 4, Module 5. All right. If you have any questions on this assignment, make sure you watch the video. You go back through and look at some of these things. Go back to your activity. Hopefully you did that correctly, the slide before this. And email me if you have any concerns. Here's our to-do list. If you haven't yet, you need to read Chapter 4, which is Understanding Rubrics and Scoring Guides. There will be a quiz later in this module on Chapter 4, so make sure you read that chapter. And then complete the assignment we just went over, developing a checklist. And that is a 2-tiered assignment with A, listing a sports-related skill that you would use in PE or coaching, and B, list a job-related skill associated with the career in the wellness field. All right. And here are our Module 5 assignments. These are the dates for the fall 2020. If this is a later version of the course, the dates may change. But the Module 5 assignments and deadlines, first of all, assignment developing a checklist is due Friday, October 16th. And then we will go through the rest of these assignments. You can find these and the correct up-to-date due dates on Canvas on the Module 5 basic information page, as well as an announcement will be out. And you can scroll through these assignments to ensure you're seeing them. They're all attached to Module 5 in Canvas. So what does the assignment look like? All right, so here's our developing a checklist assignment. It's on Canvas. And just like we had in the slide, list your 4 essential components, number them 1 through 4. Under each one, explain what doing it correctly looks like. Provide 1 to 3 sentences or bullet points under each numbers. So here's your hint. Think of a sports-related skill such as a hit, throw, shot, etc. Go down to B, list your job-related skill. 5 or more critical components, number them. Same thing. Under each one, have 1 to 3 detailed sentences or bullet points. And then here's your hint. Think of a job-related skill that might be on a performance evaluation for somebody in the PE, coaching, or wellness field, such as steps of taking an ankle, steps for CPR, preparing for an away game, possibly a scouting report checklist if you want to be a coach. So there is your assignment. Good luck. We'll have another virtual meeting next class period. So make sure you're checking your Canvas page, the information on a daily basis, as well as for the entire module. All right. Thanks for watching the video. Hopefully we did an effective job introducing you to Unit 2, as well as giving you a basic introduction of Chapter 4 material to help you understand rubrics and scoring guides, as well as provide you with the detailed information and skills to help yourself apply the knowledge from our video lecture to develop a checklist that you can use in the field. And you'll actually be developing 2 checklists, one for a sports related skill and one for a career or job related skill. Thanks. We'll see you next time. And remember, take this learning, apply it to your personal or professional situation, and go change the world for the better.